So Shay's not going to be here? Okay.
We are live.
All right, this calls to order the Planning Commission meeting for December 19th, 2022. First item of business is item 1, approval of minutes from meeting held on November 28th, 2022. Is there any comments or a motion?
I'd make a motion we approve the minutes as written.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, minutes pass. Next item of business is item 2, old business. There is none. Moving on, item 3, new business. Item A, site plan and exception to the green space for installation of swimming pool, spa, and fire pit at 6001 Reinhardt Drive, Fairway, Kansas, as submitted by Kurt Krasinger of Lorax Design Group on behalf of Nicole and Sean McCarney, property owners. Basil, will you please provide your staff report?
Yes, I have the report. I'll let my report stand as submitted, and I'm open to questions.
Is there any questions for staff?
So I see they put in a drainage system. Does that pretty well take care of the excess water that they were running off their site?
Well, per the watershed analysis, that's what they're saying. There's one issue with that, but that will be part of the plan review. The pop-outs, the 5 of them, they're within 5 feet of the property line, so they have to move it in. So that's one issue, but that's a plan review issue.
They don't have a lot of room to move them in, do they?
I think they do.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they specify the elevation, but they have to move it 5 feet away from property line.
Any other questions? All right. Other questions for the applicant? I feel like there might be. Or maybe we could ask them to kind of just address the reason that they're here to ask for the exception. Is the applicant here? Would you state your name and address for the record and kind of walk us through the reason for requesting this exception? Yes.
Press the button.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for having me. My name is Kurt Krasinger with Lorax Design Group at 8021 Santa Fe Drive, Suite 200, Midland Park, Kansas. Our clients, Nicole and Sean McCarney, had approached us earlier this year, to look at a pool project in their backyard. And we've been doing this probably since I've been in my business for 14 years. We work all throughout the Kansas City area and also throughout the country. When they bought this property, they moved in from San Antonio. They had come into town looking for a new property, ended up buying this property here at this address with the expectation of putting in a swimming pool. They've had 2 swimming pools at 2 previous locations. Their son swims, and then he has a condition himself medically that swimming is therapeutic for his condition that he has with his hip and his back and some of the things that he's working with. And so a pool was a big deal for them. And so when they approached us, they said, hey, we've talked to our realtor, we've talked to 2 pool contractors, and we were told that we could do a pool in our backyard. So we take it upon ourselves to, okay, well, our first step is that we have to go do our own analysis. We have to study the project, we have to go out and do site photos, we have to do dimensions, acquire any kind of documentation like the survey that was provided by their builder at the time of building the house, and do our own investigation. And as we go through designing a pool, we find out that really the only allowable square footage that's left for this property is like 220 square feet. The survey that was in the packet that we were provided, the patio that was on the back of the property was never really installed that way. I think that patio is close to around 336 square feet. The patio that's out there now is a 4-foot by 9-foot patio. I have a picture I brought with me. I forgot to include it in the packet. So we're talking about a 36-foot patio that's at the base of a staircase that comes off their existing deck. And what they're wanting to do is do like what a lot of people want to do. They want to invest in their backyard. They want to put in a backyard grilling station, a place to put a harvest table, and a place to put a pool and a spa. After we went through the process of looking at this, we had the unfortunate position, we're put in the unfortunate position to tell them that the dream that they wanted really they can't do, because obviously we came up with the initial design, which is design number 1, which is really what they all entitled. When they came to us, these are all the program elements we'd love to have in our dream backyard. And we designed that, we found that it was 30% over what the allowable square footage is for this particular lot. Now, it seems like a fairly large lot. It's 18,000 square feet, and then the house itself is, is large as well. But until you actually start doing the study and looking at your regulations, we found that we were well over that. So what I'm here for this evening is to try to talk through some of the reasonings why these people came in and invested in your community to buy a house and put something in the backyard, and now they can't. They're disappointed. And they're lay people, he's a surgeon. I can't remember what she does for a living, but they obviously, a lot of people that approach us, and I've been doing this for 27 years, don't really understand what they can and can't do when they buy a property, whether it's a playground or whether it's a playground apparatus or whether it's a basketball court or an accessory building or a pool. So we obviously have our objectivity is to go in and look at this from the standpoint of what we can do. And so without just coming here tonight with showing you the largest pool, that, the thing that they wanted to do day one, the first design we put together a couple alternate plans to show you that our client is willing to do whatever they possibly can to either, adjust the plan that we have had brought forth. That is the original design is 30% over the impervious area, but it's allowable. But they've also put together design number 2 and 3 to look at some options to say, how can we even reduce this more to potentially be in the ballpark where something that you guys would actually look at this and give an opportunity to say, well, is there a means where they could actually achieve something in their backyard that they originally set out to do? And as you can see with every plan, what we've tried to do is just keep peeling back the impervious area, the paving, the hardscape area. And in some cases, we've said, well, I know that this it doesn't read the way in your code as far as actually paving being, something that's impervious. Something that allows, water to run through it and store it. Is there even another layer that we could add to this where the pavers can all be pavers that allow water to go through them and go to a subsurface area and go back into the drainage system that they went through and actually paid the design for. And the design that was paid for by Continental was actually on the most extensive of the plans, the design number 1. So obviously would handle everything that you see in the first design, with the pool, the spa, the patios, the seeing area around the fire pit, and everything they have in the backyard. So if we were to look at a lesser plan that had less paving and less features, then obviously the infrastructure even needed for the plan that they've put together for the infrastructure, for the drainage, would also be less as well. But they're also asking questions like, well, is it even feasible to look at other kind of paving types? They'd rather not go back and remove part of their driveway. I know that the other thing is deductive. What are the things that are on site that we could remove? Part of the driveway or another patio or something else. It's unfortunate, but if you look at the plan, they don't really have much more to remove. Their driveway seems kind of wide at 18 feet. You could start going in and suggesting they remove 2 foot on one side of the driveway. And there's little things you could do, but they don't have a lot of other paving around the house. The house itself is really takes up most of the footprint of that impervious area that we're actually looking at. That is over when you start looking at the things in the backyard that you add. So really, that's what I'm here for tonight, is just to present the project as it's been designed, understanding that we are outside the scope of what is allowable, and just to see if there's any kind of pathway that we could take that look forward to go back to our client to either redesign or look at one of these designs so we can actually move forward.
So the existing plan from the survey shows an infiltration box in the backyard, is that correct? 8 by 10 by 3?
Oh, the 10 by 30, the 8 by 10 by 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know that was ever installed. I did never talk to the builder or talk to the homeowner. But this was back in 2017, so I have limited knowledge on some of these things, other than the fact that what we had gone out and did our study on as far as with the impervious areas, we went out and double-checked everything and found that, for instance, like the patio that wasn't built.
Does the watershed analysis address this 8 by 10 by 3? I didn't see in there where it talks about it, so I'm wondering, does it assume that it's there or not?
We gave
Or
them-
is this the existing watershed analysis?
Yeah. This watershed analysis is all based on the proposed, what we're proposing.
Chair, if I may,
Yeah.
if you look at the survey and the numbers and what they submitted, the numbers don't match. What I base my numbers in the report is based on the survey. So that makes sense because I wasn't given that indication that the patio is smaller than what is submitted. But if you notice the numbers on their submittal, the square footage is less when the survey show.
Okay, but do you know if the infiltration that was planned for the new build?
That
If that's
I'm not
addressed-
sure. That's before my time.
Yeah, well, I just don't know if it's addressed in the new watershed analysis too, because if
Well,
it's
the
not there,
watershed
then they're
is a
assuming.
true detention basin.
Okay, so they're not assuming some of it's already being collected?
Yeah, so it's really not even an
Okay.
infiltration. It's a true detention basin, underground basin that they're installing.
It's called storm.
Just my concern is that if we already assumed some water was gonna be taken care of, and then the watershed is now just addressing the new water, and then you tell me that infiltration thing is not there, then there's
I
a
don't know if it
deficit.
is or not, yeah.
Right.
It'd be
I
underground.
think the watershed analysis is based on the hard service that's going to be part of option one.
Correct. The work, we took the
So
most
it's
extensive.
accounting for everything, the existing plus the new additional.
So it doesn't account for this infiltration box that's shown?
No.
Okay,
They designed it based on the total.
okay.
So it looks like there's areas that are sunken by the pool. Would those go to the sewer, or would those go through the drainage for that sunken area? Would that go through the infiltration?
It would go back into the storm tech chambers that are designed to be on the south portion of the lot. Providing that that would be the design that would be approved moving forward. As you could see, the other two options remove that completely from the plan.
Now, have these hard surface areas around the pool deck and the different areas that you've got, is any of that permeable?
Well, that's what I was mentioning earlier, sir. Is it Ron? Our client is completely open to using permeable paving completely around the pool. And we work with that all the time. So there's many options out there, many manufacturers and different methodologies and how you do that. And because we did a storm water drainage plan, we would work with that civil engineer to make sure that anything that we're doing is tied directly into that storm tech chamber. And we're very familiar with that. But yeah, that would be a consideration, is if we could move forward with one of these plans, is that we make sure that all those paving areas that are at the surface of the pool would be used for permeable paving. I think the ones that you probably would not want to use that for are the areas that are actually in the walkout out of the basement. We'd want to detail that differently. But when we came up on the pool deck area and the surface around the pool, those areas would be perfect candidates for permeable paving.
Now, with a permeable paving system, would that water collect and dissipate under the deck areas, or would it be collected and sent to your retention or your
It can work several different ways. The way we prefer to do it is we like to get that water infiltrated into the ground, into infrastructure, which often is a PVC pipe. And then that water actually is mitigated to the area where the storm tech chambers are. And the idea around the storm tech chamber is it basically is creating a large void in the earth that's covered by large plastic basins to create a void to allow that water to sit and dissipate in the earth first. And then on large storm events, like if you had a 50-year storm event, that water, if it ever came up above a certain elevation, would hit another release that would go out to pop-ups that are out adjacent to the property. So that's the whole reason for creating these storm tech chambers and or flow wells and other things that we've used in other projects, is to keep it on site as long as possible so that your time of concentration is less, so that you're not pushing it downhill or onto your neighbor.
But what it sounds to me like is you're saying even if you use the permeable deck areas, that you still have basically the same amount of water running off. I mean, it
Yeah,
wouldn't
yes, sir.
dissipate under the
The
deck.
water that was done in this report was all assuming that every drop of water that falls within the property line on this property is going to be contained on site through this storm structure. You know, that you're accounting for all of that based on the new design.
But there isn't a way you can put like a series of perforated PVC pipe under
That's
these?
the other way I was talking about earlier. One way is you could actually you could mitigate that water and take it onto its flow path to another chamber, like is here on the south part of the property that's designed. The other way to do it is you actually create what's called French drains,
Right.
which are long linear passageways where water can actually hit the ground at those locations and dissipate back into the soil.
Now, does that add a lot to cost of the job to go to permeable paving and the,
It's more expensive than traditional paving. A traditional concrete pool deck around a pool is usually a 5.5-inch slab, and it's over a crusher run or a subgrade material. But when you're doing any kind of thing that actually has either a French drain associated with it or subsurface drainage, where you're wanting to contain it for a period or detain it for a period of time before it goes to another location, you have to over excavate even more. You stratify the different types of gravel that go underneath that paving so that you're creating voids down for that water to actually to set. Like Paver Company is a good company that we've used in the past. It has all those case studies done, and they've done all the engineering for them, got chambers, and hold it there. Yeah. You're taking it in a couple different locations, so you're probably mitigating some opportunity to overload one and detain it in another location.
on the plan that's showing here, at the bottom side of the plan, it looks like a bunch of long stepstones, and I'm assuming those must be paving?
Yeah, those.
And then the area around that, what is that, gravel?
That's just mulch.
Just mulch?
Uh-huh. So all the areas with the hatching, that's similar to that around the project in the design. It's brown, it's got the hatching, the poche on it. That's all mulch. So that's all area that allows the water to go.
What is the real point of all those then? I mean, I can't see people going out and walking from there to go around into the other end. I mean, is it just look good on the drawing, or is there some actual reason for it?
We do that a lot, just to establish a passageway. A lot of times when you design pools, I'm not a big fan of putting paving all the way around a pool. We try to limit that, make it look a little bit more resort-like, a little more functional. A lot of times when you put 12 or 18 foot of paving around a pool, it looks too municipal. It looks like an HOA pool or a city pool. And a lot of times residents don't want that. They want it to look more resort-like, where you have landscape around the perimeter of it as much as you possibly can. So in this case, we're trying to soften that by not putting as much paving. The other thing it does, it allows for circulation around the pool, where you do have parties and young kids and other people that want to circulate around the pool. They're just not necessarily walking on a 12-foot wide swath of concrete. It's just these are stepping stones. And those stepping stones, like we had talked, all of this could actually be a permeable application.
I noticed the steps from the existing lanai are to the right in this view, but in the existing drawings, they were to the left.
Yes, ma'am.
So are you changing, is that to the right, is that new, or is that how they are actually
Yeah, it's
built?
outlined in your exhibits where we talk about areas that we're demoing and areas that are new. The reason behind that is currently the lower if you were to pan back up where you were at in the design, right there. If you could just go down a little bit, there you go. You can see the walkout area. Well, currently right now that's not a walkout. They just have some windows that go down close to grade. And they've always talked about, well, I don't know why the builder never built it that way. So they'd like to do is knock out those bay of windows, cut out the foundation, do a walk out and walk up so they can get directly to the house, because that's directly the path of where they would go into the bathrooms. So the reason, you can see on either side, we'd actually have counter there, and then we're actually going to have pergola over that area. The stairs coming off the existing deck area would land in an awkward location where we're actually now would have a wall that goes down into the basement. So we had to switch that to the opposite side with this particular design.
Because, it's beautiful, and having a new walkout area is awesome, but looking at your design number 3, it seems like if you took the stairs back the way they're supposed to, reduced all those pavers and maybe a little bit of the walkout, you might be close to being within the requirements.
We, if that's something that you want us to look at, we would basically go back and keep the existing stairs where they're at. We would just have to change that detail as you're coming out of the basement to where the stairs would engage with that. Because what happens is that where that stair lands, which is really to the right of that wall of the sunken area, and we would still have to have additional stairs. You can see the stairs that are going down there now. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 treads and 5 risers. We would just have to extend that with the stairs themselves, or we'd have to land at grade and come down that set of stairs. We'd just have to relook at that. I don't think that's an issue.
Yeah, I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to help you find ways to.
Oh yeah. By all means, if that's a way to reduce it, we're looking for suggestions and ways that we can actually make something work. Yeah.
Well, I had a couple quick questions. So on the drainage, proposed drainage improvement plans that show the red lines for the, Kim, if you could pull those up, that show basically where the piping's coming from and conveying the water to the.
Is it on the watershed? I'm sorry.
Yes,
No,
it is, Kim.
Yeah, it's further down.
Further,
Keep going.
keep going. Right there.
So with this option, it looks like they're conveying all the roof runoff from the existing building. What's the intent to handle the additional runoff from the impervious area that's created with the improvements?
I guess I don't follow your question.
So all of these are noted to come off gutter downspouts off the existing house, all these red lines that can transfer to these storm drainage basins. What's the intent? Do you have area drains or something else that need to pick up? Like, for example, like, where these pool decks are and such, so it's going to shed water away from the pool. Should be some consideration for area drains and then the associated calculations with that.
Yeah, so the way this report and the way the drainage study works is that we're looking at every drop of water that lands on this property. And a lot of times when we're putting in storm tech chambers like this, we've done it on numerous other projects. A lot of times where we see a lot of issues with property is our downspouts. Because downspouts are either dumping at the base of the foundation where they're not supposed to be, and or they're dropping over on additional driveways, sidewalks, pool decks, and things like that, which becomes problematic. So we like to get all those into the ground and take those over to the storm tech chambers as fast as possible, as do we would with any kind of surface drainage for landscape beds, pool deck areas, strip drains, trench drains, all those type of things that would actually tie back into the storm deck chamber.
Okay, I understand it in concept. I just don't see that that's addressed in the report or on this drawing.
Okay, well, obviously the drainage report was required to be able to come and present to you this evening. The plans that we have, the designs that we have, we don't get into drainage at that point in time. We always start with a design first, a concept plan. That's where the concept plan level is where we're at right now. And then once we receive a plan that's approved, then we go back in and start massaging it, and then we do a full set of construction documents. So, for instance, on a project like this, once a plan is approved not only through the homeowner, but through either an HOA or a governing body like you, then we would go back and actually do a full set of construction documents that details everything out. Drainage locations, paving, grading, drainage, details for the pool, hydraulics, structural engineering, all those things. And a set like that, maybe 12 to 22 pages. I mean, it's a full set of documents. So we're not expecting the homeowner to build from this, and that's why you're not seeing designated locations for area drains. We just know that that's going to happen at some point in time.
And what you're saying, though, the calculations.
The calculations assumes all of that.
It does,
because
okay.
the paved area is the paved area.
Okay.
And when you run a report, storm drainage study, whether it's a 10-year flood or a 50-year flood, they're assuming the worst, and they're assuming all that is factored into it. And
then, Basil, for my own knowledge, do we consider the pool surface area impervious, correct? Meaning that's counted as hardscape?
That's counted as hardscape,
And
that's
then
correct.
Code pools, overflow drains drain to sanitary sewer, or do they drain to storm?
Typically, I mean, they drain to storm.
Okay.
They don't, no. You
Okay.
cannot connect to sanitary.
You cannot? Okay. Okay.
The other thing is too, when it's covered, then it's obviously impervious too, right?
Right.
Which is generally about 50% of the time.
Right. And then my other, just quick question, just to understand too, there's about an elevation, datum elevation topography, about 10-foot difference between finished floor of the existing residence as it sits today and the back property line. To me, with this width and everything, are you guys, any provisions for any sort of retaining walls or something that's going to hold this? There's some shots out here, like 928 out at the property line, and the existing house is at finished floor is 937.
The finished floor is up in whole elevation. Does that make sense? When you
So the lot slopes, correct?
no, the backyard's relatively flat.
Okay.
So what happens is when you come in the front door, you go up a set of stairs, you walk in the front of the house. When you come out on the lanai or the deck area, you're still almost a full story above grade. You're not a full story because the walkout, that's the reason they want to do the walkout, is it
Gotcha.
it's literally, I think, 3 or 4 feet lower.
Okay.
And it would have been a true walkout. I mean, that's why they were asking, like, why didn't the builder do this from day one? So the walkout's really not that dramatic. But yeah, the backyard is relatively flat. There's
Okay.
2 contours in the entire backyard.
Gotcha. I see that on your updated plan.
So would you anticipate that when you do the revised calculations, if we were to approve this, that your system of tank storage over here, or do you call them chambers, would that increase?
Oh, no, this is assuming the worst condition based on Design 1, which is a full-blown document, a design that shows you everything that would have been designed within that plan. Each one of these subsequent designs, Design 2 and 3, are less obstructive to the land than what the first one, if that makes sense. The first one has the most amount of paving and hard surface impervious area. The second one, we've pulled some of that away, and the third's even less. So actually, the storm tech chambers, there would be less required if we went with design number 3.
Well, agreed, except that maybe they didn't design the house properly with infiltration, if they didn't put in that infiltration area, in which case the homeowners would still have to address the runoff of the roof, right?
Yeah, and I can't answer.
Right, that goes to you, Basil, but
And I did not check the existing, but it looks like from the site plan for the existing house, it looks like the downspout was going to grade. So part of the back downspouts are not going to the infiltration. They're
But was
just
that
taking
correct,
a
though?
portion of it. Yep.
I'm worried that they're already gonna have problems. So maybe his study shows that, oh, it's not a big deal, but it already might be a problem, and then adding all this hardscape is gonna.
Well, I see your worry. I mean, again, they're saying the runoff is not going to be higher, but then a faster runoff because they have 5 pop-outs close to the property line. I mean,
Yeah.
I see your concern, but
But the pop-outs only work as if you get beyond a certain storm event. Does that make sense? All the water goes to the storm tech chamber because you're creating a vessel. Like if this was an area underwater or underground and this was a surface area, your countertop, we're creating a void. So during a storm event, all that water goes in there, it dissipates in the soil and the gravel and in the soil around it. And if it goes beyond that, if we had a 6-inch storm that went on for hours and hours and hours, that vessel keeps filling. At some point, there's an overflow, just like in a pool. At the top of that, there's a breach point. And it says, okay, at this point, when we get to the certain point where we can go no longer, then it'll breach out, then it'll go out those pipes, and then it'll do it the pop-up. And those are usually pulled away from the property line. So again, it has another time of concentration to where it has to hit the lawn. It still has an opportunity to filtrate back into the soil and slow down by the lawn before it ever gets to anyone else's house. So they're designed, and that's why these reports are done this way, with all those purposes in mind. But regardless of whether they have an infiltration tank there or not, I don't know that. I can't answer that. This was designed for the worst case scenario based on the design number 1 that was prepared, and the storm drain for the house. I mean, the roof drains and the paving, the driveway and the sidewalks and everything else that's on site. Yeah, we asked them to do that because we said, listen, if we're going to look at this, let's look at what the homeowner originally intends or would like to do if in their dream. It's like, hey, if this is the dream backyard, let's look at it like at the worst situation and make sure that it works. And then if we have to go down a notch or 2, then this still works. You know, it's over-designed at that point.
So is there a rate of discharge out of these chambers during a rain event, or is the water just trapped in there?
Well, it's a detention facility for a period of time, and it dissipates. And if the vent doesn't go beyond, I would have to go back and look at the report and look at the sightings of what they have. But like I said, if it was a 10-year storm event and it hits a certain point where it breaches that overflow, I don't know what the discharge rate is. It would just depend on how big that storm event was and the duration of it. I mean, sometimes you can have 6 inches of rain over 6 days, but when you got 6 inches of rain over 6 hours, that's a lot different, you know.
I think, Ron, in the design, they are putting those numbers. So on page 1, I think, Kim, if you go up.
Do you know what these numbers are based upon, Basil? I'm used to seeing like rainfall per hour, not like this.
Yeah, they did submit, and we usually don't give you the whole calculation, but again, it's a computer-based generated calculation.
You can see right here, the 2-year discharge is at 1.2 cubic feet per second, 10-year is at 2.2 cubic feet per second, and the 100-year is 4.1 cubic feet per second.
So to me, I mean, it looks like they are anticipating some discharge. I don't think the chambers are, it's just slowing the rate and then you have a discharge.
Well, the way that they would normally work is the chambers would fill with water and then drain out slowly over time. Instead of when you have a large event where the chambers themselves can't drain as quickly as water's coming in, so then it would overflow into these outfalls. But I had a couple of questions with regard, I guess, to kind of like the scope of this exception. We keep talking about impermeable space and the drainage and all of that. I presume that it would be required, if it's approved, that all of the drainage design and all that is part of a permit application and approval at that point.
That is correct. The only thing I notice as far as the pop-out locations are not correct. So that needs to be changed, part of the application.
So as it relates to our scope, I'm not sure that we need to necessarily validate the design of the drainage system. That will be done at some point. My question, I guess, is what is the criteria for what is an acceptable either increase or not of drainage? So if it's somehow somebody says today is 4 cubic feet per second, what's acceptable? 4.1, it can't go up. Is 5 acceptable? What is the?
Well, we don't, I mean, the code says that you can't exceed 30%. Or, I'm sorry, the percentage that's the green space.
Well, so that's my next part is with regard to the scope is that's the impermeable space.
I'm
and all
assuming
that.
you're asking about the discharge. If it's higher, that's going to be up to you guys. I mean, typically we're assuming you're not affecting the neighbor. You're not making the scenario worse as far as runoff.
As it exists
So
today.
we don't have a number, like I can't give you a number. I'm
This is all
assuming it's going to be the same. If it's going to be worse, then that's up to you guys to decide.
Yeah.
But the scope itself is the green space. We've kind of
That's
gotten off
right.
topic because
Well,
we're
that's
asking a
where I
lot of
was going
questions,
to.
and that's helping us understand if we want to allow the exception, because then we would have to examine these things. But ultimately, the question is green space.
Right. I guess my point is they can engineer the drainage system such that the runoff from the property is whatever. It could be the same as it is today. Just depends
That's
on how
right.
much it
But
is
then
stored.
you're still dealing with the exception.
Yeah. So
for
then the
green
question
space.
really is the green space. I guess is kind of like we've been talking about other stuff, but it's really the green space.
If I could just add, I pulled up in the report the exception criteria. Since you're considering exception, these are the criteria for granting the exception. I don't know if that helps with what you're asking, but that's what I'm hearing is what you're trying to get at on this.
So one other question I had for you, Basil, and maybe I'm putting you on the spot, so you may not know the answer. I know we've seen a few pools recently. This pool seems larger than what we've seen recently, but I can't recall exactly. What has been the typical size pool?
It's really case by case, and we were talking about it with Kim, and we tried to pull some examples. You really can't compare because you guys have seen bigger lots,
Okay.
with the pool size maybe the same, but the lot is maybe 10,000 square feet larger. So,
I can answer that question.
Okay.
I've been designing pools for 14 years all over the country. We design 60 to 80 pools a year, and both residential and commercial. But in Kansas City, we have big lots, we have big homes. The average pool that we start off with is a 20 by 40, which is 800 square feet. So, I mean, this is well within that range of what we typically see. And the backyard was really small. When they first approached us and said they wanted a pool, they didn't even think a pool would even fit in the backyard, because the backyard, although it seems fairly large, it's long and narrow. I mean, it's not really deep. It's not these backyards you see on Lee Boulevard that have really deep backyards. So we designed something that was appropriate to their backyard. But usually 800 square feet is somewhere someone starts, and a lot of times it either goes down or up based on the features that they add to the project.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you.
You bet.
All right, discussion?
Well, Kim, you were around when they rewrote these codes. How did they come about deciding if you had a bigger lot that you could have less green, or you had to have greater green space? I mean,
The thought process was, as the lot size increased, we went on a sliding scale, and at one point, once you get additional hardscape. The home was actually built when we were just at a flat rate of 60% for the whole lot. So they had designed it to allow for a pool, but then when they finally got around to it, that square footage over 30,000 was 100%. So
it was just kind of a judgment call. It wasn't anything to do with drainage or excess water runoff because the places were overbuilt.
no.
I mean, we were both on the commission at the time. I mean, I think there were some discussions on wanting to really keep this community and green and city of trees, and then also the runoff. We can't do a lot to address the runoff, but by keeping green space, we would help minimize it as much as we can, right? Because if we can't say you're only allowed to allow this much runoff, we can't limit that right now. So that was our kind of way of trying to help with that.
Well, I guess, I mean, my feeling, I understand all that, but then I think, okay, these folks bought this house and they wanted to have a pool, and at a period in time when we keep making this more restrictive. I mean, it used to only be 40%, I think, or 50, 45. But I kind of feel like it's not proportionally fair. I mean,
this particular lot was built under the current requirements, this home. It was built under what is on the books now for the code. The one that was on Windsor that was over 30,000 was built prior to the graduating scale.
So if I'm reading this right, our code would say that this lot requires 67% green space. That's what, and as it stands today, it has like 68%. So it's basically right at the limit. So any amount of green space that's taken away, more or less, give or take 200 square feet, it requires an exception. And so
that's correct.
So then I suppose our job is to decide if any of these three options are acceptable or if we want to see something else.
Correct.
I have a question for the applicant's representative, if he could come up.
Yes, sir.
On these detention systems, that's one thing that concerns me sometimes is that I know they can be installed. Are the maintenance of them, though, are they pretty easy to maintain, or is it something that requires continual maintenance?
If designed properly, we haven't seen a whole lot of issues with them. We put them on so many properties. I mean, Leewood requires one on almost every job that we do. Mission Hills, We now are starting to do work in Fairway, Prairie Village. I mean, everyone's on board with doing this because they recognize that people are going in and tearing down houses and building new ones, and houses are getting larger, and people are wanting to improve their backyards. When I first got in this industry 27 years ago, there wasn't very many people putting in pools, and now every phone call we get is about a pool. And so it has become a very phenomenon that people are wanting to, and also 2 years ago when we went through COVID, a lot of people said, we're tired of traveling around the country and tired of going to the HOA pool, we're just going to build our own. So it's become more prominent, for us to receive calls about that. But along with that comes these detention facilities that are required, and that's why every city that we work with, we obviously do all the hardscapes and design of the pools and structural engineering and the detail and the grading and drainage, but we're always bringing in a civil engineer to do the stormwater reports, and they're trained to do this. And as you can see by the length of the report, there's a lot that goes into it. So they're really looking at it fairly seriously, and I think that for the most part they really work. I haven't had any issues in all the years I've been doing this where someone's had one that's failed. So
No issues with the conduits, with settling or breaking? And all
yeah, there's a
this?
couple different systems. The storm tech chambers have been the ones that we've used most often. There's another called a flow well, which is basically a big barrel, like a 55-gallon drum. It's got perforations around the perimeter. It's filled with gravel. Water comes in from all sides, and then it has an overflow at the top. And you could put those in chambers in serious configurations as well. In smaller properties, those are usually prominent. But the storm tech chambers, we first started using them 15 years ago on commercial properties under the parking lots. So,
So there's quite a bit of redundancy built into them.
oh yeah, I come from a commercial background, so that's where I first started using those. And so when I got in, I did SWIP plans and all that on this at that level on large developments. And then when I started doing residential, I'm like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. And we might as well take that technology that's been used for years under roadways and parking lots and airports and things like that. We have a lot of area that you need to detain, and that's what you're really seeing here. This is a commercial grade system.
One other question is, do you know of any conversations I've had with the neighbors about this improvement?
They said that they know all their neighbors, and they know that the neighbor behind them has a pool. The one to the right of them has a newer contemporary home that's done all kinds of improvements. It doesn't have a pool, but a lot of paving. They didn't seem to think that anyone had an issue with improving. It was just more, they were surprised that they couldn't do anything. It's more.
I think the neighbor to the back of them has a pool, if I'm correct.
That is correct. The back neighbor, they have a pool.
Yeah, it's a fairly sizable lot with a lot of improvements. So the one directly behind them that I know of. So.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, maybe we go down the line to kind of get through discussion. So Commissioner Zwick, you want to share any comments or thoughts?
I feel like the pool could be reduced a little bit in size to maybe try to offset some of that in consideration.
I'm generally supportive of the request. I like the fact you've given us 3 different options. I would probably support the option number 3. But I would understand if this body would request you to further taper it down to try to meet what you could do with the pavers on the north side. I think it's west side, I think it is. So.
I'm also somewhat undecided. I think the intent of granting any exception, I suppose, is to be somewhat lenient with the very strict rules, but also the purpose of this group is to kind of keep things within, to prevent the next thing from escalating something bigger, right? So, a 3-4% increase is usually something that can be dealt with, but, we don't want that to turn into 10, 12, 15. every time we accept something. So my recommendation probably would be, I think I heard that the previous rule was something like 60% green space. Before they rewrote the rules, I think if there was a way to taper the design to provide a 60% green space, then maybe that would be more, maybe that would be reasonable. But I think even though it looks beautiful, option one is so far beyond the code that it's hard to approve something like that.
So yeah, I would say I'm generally supportive of allowing people to make improvements to their backyards as long as they're within the bounds of limiting the amount of runoff, the original intent of the green space, that we don't impact our neighbors. And so in that regard, it seems like it meets the exceptions in terms of, you know, the intent of exception number 1 was better serve the intent statements. I think that's referring to limiting the amount of runoff. Seems to be designed well. It's well integrated with the house. So as long as, you know, I think the drainage in the areas that are recessed, I think we do need to make sure that those go through the detention area, that those aren't sent to the storm sewer. And as you mentioned, you know, if we can reduce the amount of hardscape and get it within a reasonable number, I think that's appropriate, because we have seen a few exceptions where we have these large houses that are now built on, you know, some of these smaller lots, and we're going to see these issues where we're going to have a lot of houses without any green space left, to where it's a small patio that's available, you know, 200 square feet, which is not ideal for a house of this size, of course. So that's where I would be.
I guess I kind of feel like I like to err on the side of the homeowner, but this is, in my opinion, too big of an ask. I think they either need to downsize the pool or go back to their original opinion of they don't have space for a pool. I know they didn't build the house, but I mean, we've got the rules. That's what we're supposed to be enforcing. We have certain limits of what we can adjust things for, but I feel like this is getting to be a little bit too big.
Thanks. I would agree. I feel for the homeowner, and I understand that the position they're in, but I think we've kind of suggested some things today that would help reduce the square footage. Maybe the pool has to get a little bit smaller. There seems to be some seating area. Maybe that could be just swimming area, or if they really want the seating area, then they downsize the swimming area. But I think there'd have to be some compromise from the homeowner to reduce the square footage of the overall size of the hardscape. So. Sure.
So I guess what I'm hearing you say is a couple things. When we go back to the third design, we're asking for, it is 17% over the allowable square footage for impervious, and we've reduced it a great deal. We've removed the spa, removed the seating areas around it, the fire pit,
Yeah, I think that one's 8% over.
So if that one were to reduce, you're saying that would be something you would consider as something moving forward?
Well, we need to still make a motion and decide on a percentage, but yeah, the consensus here I'm hearing from the group is that a smaller percentage may be something that we would be willing to approve.
Okay. Well, the other thing I'd like to mention, it isn't specific to this client, but just all clients that are coming in our door now, is that I think, I know for a fact that Leewood's seeing this, Mission Hill's seeing this, and Prairie Village is seeing this, is that there's a lot of homeowners that are buying homes that are second and third owners. People move in and out, and don't really, again, these are lay people. They don't do what you do. They don't do what I do. And they don't, I've asked a lot of people since this project, family and friends, like, hey, did you ever look at your ordinance before you bought your house? No, I just fell in love with the house, And they buy the house and they get in, they find out later they can't do this. We've seen this quite often from a lot of the different municipalities where people come in and they want to do something in their backyard because, again, COVID, and then they find out they can't. So this is going to be an ongoing issue where I'm going to be in front of you or these other municipalities talking about what we can and can't do. And these people are wanting, these guys are wanting, a project like this is $500,000 invested in someone's backyard, which affects people locally from the different trades. When you're buying products, you're installing products, your tax dollars, inspection permits, all these things are affecting the community. And so that's the thing I struggle with as being a landscape architect and someone that's trying to provide a service to someone that's wanting something done and done right. So that's the frustration I have, and it's not at you. It's something I'm having right now just in general because this is just something that's come on over the last 3 or 4 years. And I know that you guys have regulations for a reason. It's just that I need to figure out, is there a happy medium or how can we tackle this in the future to where there is something where someone can come in and do something. And I get it. You already have something in place, but if there's a way to take this third option and reduce it further and go back to with some hope that they could do something, otherwise they may end up moving. That's just kind of where they're at, because they really had told their son that they're going to get a pool, and he wanted it for himself, and now they can't do anything in their backyard. Because 220 square feet, you can't even go buy a blow-up at Costco, to put in your backyard.
Understood, and that's why if you've heard these comments here, we're trying to work with you. And
No,
make
I
it-
understand.
make-
I'm just
But we
expressing-
have our job is to follow the regulation, and also we're trying to promote a good neighborhood where runoff is not an issue, and we have a lot of green space. Like, that's what our community, that's what our comprehensive plan has asked us to follow, and so that's why we're trying to promote that. So, understood, and I know it's frustrating, but we also have to look at both sides, and we can't just side with you and then have another issue next month whenever someone else wants to come and bring it up.
I completely get it.
I think what I hear our applicant saying is he's looking for some guidance, and I'm supportive of the 8%. I know my associates here are a little bit less hesitant, and I respect that. But going forward, I heard somebody say, 4% is kind of what we've been approving in the past, and obviously we can't really guarantee anything, but maybe just some guidance we could give them and the homeowner, people who have invested in our community, about what we might be able to approve, other than, just you're under the requirement. So,
I mean, we can say that's what we've seen in the past, but I think a lot of it depends also on the plan and you guys can speak for yourselves, but we like to see the drainage. That's why we've asked tons of questions on that, because if the drainage wasn't well thought out, then we may not be in this position right now, and we might have already said no. So there's a lot that goes into it besides just, you're over by this much percent. And I can say, like, me personally, I bought a house. I'm an engineer. We have an easement in the backyard. We didn't realize it. We went to add on to the house, and we're like, oh, shoot, we can't do it because the easement runs right behind the patio. So, yeah, this isn't an easement, but it's similar. It happens. So there's challenges of being a homeowner. And
I get it.
buying
Our
different
client
lots.
believed in this so much and wanted me to come forward. They could have just given up, but they spent $3,500 just on the drainage report. That's how much they believe in wanting to do this the right way. They also are paying us as a landscape architect to go through this process as well. So they're wanting to do it the right way. They're just not hiring a pool contractor to come in and put something in, a quick scribble on a piece of paper and trying to pull a permit. So I respect what you guys are doing. So yeah, I just appreciate the time. Yeah.
So I think it's up to us now to come up with, if that is what we want to do, determine what percentage we're okay with for this particular project. I think Rourke proposed 7%. I think I heard you proposed 8%.
My thought, looking at the plans and the circumstances, all things considered, to me, 60% green space would be an acceptable compromise.
which, if my math is correct, would that be about a 700-foot reduction in his current option B?
Which option?
Option 3, I'm sorry, option 3.
Option 1 is at 68, isn't it?
I think option 3 is like 1,400 over.
So, it would be
I don't have my calculator, and I don't have my cell phone, so I apologize.
Well, option 3 is it
Yeah, 60%,
is 59%, so it only have to go down 1%.
yeah.
On option 3,
60% green space would equate to 10,835 square feet on this property. And option 3, as it stands, is 10,637, so they'd have to make a 200 square foot
Reduction.
somewhere. I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be back here, like you said. If there's a sidewalk or something in the front of the house that nobody uses, that could be taken out, something like that. That's just my own. I said 60% because that's what I heard at one point the rule was, and I think for a large lot, given the circumstance and wanting to, I don't know that we want to necessarily discourage investment like this in people's homes, but we do have to do it within reason. So 60% seemed like a reasonable compromise to me.
I agree. That makes sense.
I second that.
Yeah, I think it's a decent rationale, and we'll probably need to revisit this later because we've probably seen these issues in the last 4 meetings where we had these large homes that are built to the limits, and then we don't have any room for.
It goes in waves.
Yeah.
First we had all those, and then people are like, no, we don't want that. Now we're getting the waves, people want it.
It seems like we need some sort of.
I've been here on the
rationale to
commission long enough,
carry
I'm starting to see the
forward,
waves.
you know.
So I have a question for the applicant's representative.
Yes, sir.
So these pavers that are represented up here, do you know the approximate square footage of those? And maybe this large one right here, do you know what the dimensions of that is?
So here, I'll do some quick. Let's see. Each one of those are 5 feet wide and probably 2 by 5, so they're, what, 10 square feet? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. It's 120 square feet. You probably have something else here, just it's 40. It's probably 160 square feet.
And then the landing?
That would include the landing.
Okay.
And then it doesn't include the landing off to the left, but I mean, the other thing we could do too on this project is also, instead of 16 by 54, I mean, we could reduce that slightly. The only reason it's 54 is we have a deep well on one end. There's an area for the, for a safety factor, and there is a thing called a clear zone or a swim zone that you have to stay, before the transition, depending on how deep the pool is. So we'd have to work within those regulations as well, but we could also start pushing and pulling it further if we needed to.
Yeah, it seems like you'd be able to get there. You'd find some way to get to that if we made that the.
And to your point with the stairs, we can also go back to how the stairs, just leave the stairs the way they are now. So there's some things we could definitely do.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Is there any further discussion, or does someone want to make a motion?
Go ahead.
I would make a motion that we approve an exception to as little as 60% green space. So the applicant should revise the plan to stay within 60% green space.
Is that enough information?
Do you want it to come back to us, or is it going to go to staff?
Yeah, that was my next question.
I would let staff approve that. If it's if it's 60%, staff can approve.
Yeah, I agree.
Are we going to ask them to try
Still
to
with-
incorporate more permeable concrete if possible? Or is that?
I don't think it's necessary if they design the drainage.
As long as the detention is appropriate
Yeah.
and the runoff is reasonable.
All right, are we okay? Or do we need to do any amendments? Are we good?
Should we try and-
Do you want me to rephrase that motion?
Yeah, let's
What?
rephrase.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the motion is to approve an exception request that the project meets at least 60% green space, and for them to revise the plan to meet that, and staff can approve it.
Do we need to add something about drainage in there, that their drainage is designed in such a way that it limits the amount of runoff to what?
I don't think that's necessary because that was
Again, that will be a plan review. I mean, they have to put that drainage away from the property line.
Okay.
But the numbers, I mean, per the design or the watershed is not changing.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you. Giving us a tricky one on the holiday.
Oh, yeah, that was.
All right, next item of business is item 4, additional business, set next meeting date for January 30th, 2023. Last item is a motion to adjourn.
I have a real quick question for our legal counsel, just so I know too. We've had a lot of this come up, and obviously that's our duty as a planning commission with these exceptions, but is there not a way to somehow communicate to property owners when they buy or sale of house conveys and somebody has maxed out green space, that it's like heads up?
Well, in the past, last time we saw, the homeowner knew about it, and they still came before us, right? So I don't know if telling a homeowner even makes a difference.
Valid point. Thank you.
I mean, not to, but I mean,
generally speaking, staff is the last to find out about a purchase of a home. And yeah, I would agree with the chair. The last time, even though the builder told them, the new homeowner interpreted it different, so.
and they always hope that, well, they'll feel bad. And yes, we do empathize, but they think that maybe they can plead their case. And all right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
All right. Meeting adjourned.